We all play video games for a variety of reasons. Maybe we want to enjoy a compelling story, explore a beautiful world, or just turn our brains off after a long day. Maglam Lord fits nicely into that last category. It doesn't have the greatest story or look the best, but boy was there something about that dungeon crawling and action combat that had me coming back night after night. Let's get the story out of the way first because in my opinion, it's the least interesting part about Maglam Lord. You play as, Kilazurk? Yep, that's your name. Now, what's cool is you can choose your gender right at the beginning of the game. It doesn't have too many impacts on the game overall, but you know, there's some dialogue things that will differ here and there, and in the little dating minigame, which I'll get to later, there will be some things that change. Now, when the story starts proper, you are a demon lord and you're escaping certain death. But a few minutes later, you wake up in a mysterious new land where there is no demons, there's no fighting, everything is peaceful. However, you have lost your powers, and you're told that if you can defeat enough monsters, you'll slowly regain your powers back. And honestly, that's kind of the setup for the story, nothing all that special. There are some funny dialogue choices throughout the game. You can either choose demonic, funny, or cool, and even labels it, which is helpful. And I really enjoyed dunking on Darius. He's the goody two-shoes hero, and it was always fun to pick like the really mean option. That's kind of how I wanted my character to be towards him, but then also I liked flirting with his sister. Now, most of the footage you're watching is probably in fast forward because I ended up skipping most of the story. After the first few chapters, getting a feel for what it was like and what the story was about, I just didn't care. Honestly, at this point in my life, I just don't have time for uninteresting stories. If you can't hook me in a compelling way or tell an interesting story, I'm just not gonna care, and unfortunately, Maglam Lord wasn't able to do that. But thankfully, it does have other redeeming qualities. Now, when you're not experiencing the story, you're setting off on quests from a request board. You're either collecting X amount of items, defeating X amount of enemies, or defeating a big boss monster. Now, quests marked with an exclamation point will signify story progression, so once you're done grinding or whatever, you can finally do those quests and you'll move along with the story. And also, what's pretty nice is that the game gives you recommended levels for each quest. And honestly, you could probably get away with being 2 levels or so under the recommended level depending on your gear and your skill level with action games. Now, once you get into the quest proper, they are levels that are divided into these smaller sections in a 3D isometric look. And throughout the maps, there'll be items that you can pick up and collect, and there's also monsters running around. And once you run into enemies, it will then change into a 2.5D side-scrolling action battle. In these battles, you can attack, double jump, dodge, use spells, items, everything you would expect from an action combat system. And you can also swap between 3 different weapons, a spear, a sword, and an axe. In this game, these are all called Maglams, hence the name Maglam Lord. Now, each enemy is weak to a particular weapon, so you'll be swapping between these weapons constantly, and it kind of keeps the battles fresh this way. But to be honest, it does feel a little stiff. There's something about the way you run and dodge and jump, it doesn't feel quite as smooth as you would like it to be. Now, I will say the battles are really easy at the very beginning. I think I one-shotted my first battle, but the game does get more challenging as it goes on. And throughout the game, you will add more characters to your party, and each one, while they all use the same weapons, they have different skills that are unique to them, which keeps things fresh, especially with the different enemies that will appear in new maps. Now, I will say that the game does recycle the same enemies over and over. They're basically the same enemies, just with color swaps. I think there's maybe 10 enemies in total, not counting bosses, so you will see the same enemies over and over. That said, I just got addicted to this game loop. The missions are really short, they're like 10 minutes, at least the side ones. The story missions are a little bit longer. But for me, it was just fun to knock out a bunch of side quests, to collect different materials, to craft better weapons, and I call a game like this a podcast game. This is a game where you can just turn off the sound, ignore the story, turn on a podcast or a YouTube video or something, and just grind out some quests and zone out. Lately, I've been really busy with work and my brain just doesn't work at the end of the day, so playing Maglam Lord was super nice because I could just grind out some levels, fight some monsters, get into some action combat, try different characters, and for me, this was just perfect. One thing I will note, and this was just me skipping the tutorial, but I didn't really understand how to change your equipped items and skills at first. I was trying everything, but really all you gotta do is hold down the buttons and you can toggle through all your different items and all your different spells. Now, I did mention crafting, so let me touch on that for a bit. It's fairly simple. Enemies that you defeat in the battles will drop materials, or you can pick them up as you're exploring, and you'll use them to craft better weapons. Now your weapons can be equipped with decorative items. These will change the look of your weapons, but also give you extra stats. Some of them are obviously jokes like vegetables and stuff like that, but there's also some pretty cool ones. For me, I tried to find a balance between things that were useful with good stat boost, but also something that looked cool. Sadly, the armor you equip doesn't change you visually, but there are tons of ways to change your weapons to look really cool. Also, there is a fairly light dating component to Maglam Lord. There's a separate section called the Dating Dojo. At a quick glance, you can see all the different characters in the game and their affection level for you. Depending on how high they are for you, you can select them and go on dates with them. Now you can increase their affection level by using them more in combat, choosing dialogue options that they would like in conversation, and also having them eat their favorite foods in combat. Now I will say for the actual dates themselves, it's fairly shallow. You'll pick a character, you'll go to a date spot like a casino or a cafe or bowling, and you'll have some funny dialogue and maybe a unique portrait picture that you can see that will be unique to each character. It doesn't do a whole lot, but it's kind of a fun little side distraction when you're kind of getting bored of the combat sequences or the story. I will say though that this does change the ending, so pick your favorite and there is a nice little something extra at the end. And again, this is nothing like Persona or Trails of Cold Steel. There's not going to be this super in-depth character development, but again, it's a fun little aspect to look forward to in between all the different pieces of the game. Now, as I'm sure you can tell by now, Maglam Lord doesn't have the biggest budget in the world. The character art, while nice, is just okay to me. Honestly, it feels a little cheap. The story sequences remind me of a PS3 era NIS America game, and that may or may not be a good thing for you. The 3D models in the environments don't look very good at all. They're very cheap, very low quality. The animations are okay, but again, nothing mind-blowing. And this won't be a big deal to some, but there aren't English voiceovers. You're only gonna get Japanese voiceovers, so you're gonna have to read everything. Again, this just feels like a mid-gen PS3 game, which is not always a good thing, especially considering we are, in year 2 of PlayStation 5, so I feel like games should look a little bit better, but hey, if that's your thing, then this game might be for you. Now, I gotta be honest, I played most of Maglam Lord with the sound off, so I have no idea if the music is any good. I've been playing music from the game throughout this review, so you'll have to tell me how it sounds. Overall, Maglam Lord is a fun little game. It's got a surprisingly addicting quest loop and a decent dating side mode. That said, at $50, I just don't think it's worth that price. The production values aren't nearly high enough, the story is fairly boring, and I finished the game in around 16 hours. Now, to be fair, I did skip a lot of the story, so if you sit through all the story, you're probably looking at closer to 20 plus hours. There are just way too many other better games that are either coming out soon or just came out that you should probably spend your money on. Now, if you do spot this game for like $20 or $30 down the line, I think that's the right price and you'll have a good time with it. Now to watch another awesome JRPG related video, check out this one right here. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.